Okay, welcome very much to Conversations. And welcome, Houston. I'm glad we got it all set up and everything. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Bernad Starr Ph.D. And he's a major writer, and he's also got an important comprehensive take on things. He writes often for the Huffington Post, I know, and other things. I think his background academically is in psychology. I know he's very interested in questions of aging and larger questions of the human condition. And Bernard, welcome so much to Conversation.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's my great good pleasure. What we try to do on this series is begin it with you and your background. Born and raised, educated, and then we'll wade into discussing more newsworthy and everything. But, you know, where were you born and raised and educated a little bit?
Well, born and bred in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Brooklyn boy, and educated in Brooklyn. Went to high school there. Went to Brooklyn College, actually. Later went on to the New School for Social Research, and then eventually got a Ph.D. in psychology at Yeshiva University in New York.
And then Yeshiva is a Jewish school. Is it?
It's what?
It's Jewish. It's like a
well. The university is very secular and very...
it is.
Yes.
Even though yeshiva is associated with a place of
maybe at the lower
learning.
levels, but at the university level, I mean, they have a great law school, they have great graduate programs.
But why, okay, am I wrong in associating...
Very ecumenical.
Am I wrong with associating the word yeshiva with a spiritually oriented educational institution?
Yeah, I mean, that's the...
Why didn't they change it to the
I don't know. I'll have to write a letter to them to
ask. Okay, anyway. So that's where you took your degree in
psychology.
In psychology.
Right. And then I was a school psychologist for briefly, and then wound up back home at Brooklyn College.
Okay, yeah. And you did it in psychology. You took a doctorate in psychology?
In psychology, yes.
And like I said to you in a little talk we had a couple months ago here in the hall, you can be a psychologist. It doesn't mean a lot in a certain epistemological
Well, don't tell that to psychologists.
No, I'm making a point. But in an ontologic or epistemological sense, because you can be all the way from B.F. Skinner behavioralism to Rollo May and Carl Rogers.
Well, that's very true.
And where were you in that? So you really have to say what kind of a psychologist is motivating you?
Well, I was trained in more clinical psychology, developmental psychology. In fact, I taught developmental psychology at Brooklyn College.
Developmental?
Yes, child psychology, adolescent psychology, later adult psychology, and then got into the field of aging. Yeah. But covering a rather wide span. But yes, as you point out, there are many dimensions to psychology. Almost. So saying psychologist doesn't very.
That's right. It's the same with economics, I think, all the way from Friedman to Keynes or whatever.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
Everything is all divided up that way, so you really have to sort of subcategorize, I guess. Although we should be looking for something that's more comprehensive, don't you think? Intellectuals should be looking for a comprehensive pattern recognizing between the various disciplines, if we can, because everything is interconnected.
Well, it is, but it's these days with the information explosion, it's very difficult to be a Renaissance person, you know, covering the kind of span that you're, I think, alluding to.
You think so? You think it is? More so than in the time of Michelangelo or something? It was Renaissance in terms of that. But do you think it is?
Yes, I think we have a bit more knowledge, and maybe not knowledge, that we have more information today.
We have more information. We have information overload in a certain
Very much so,
sense.
yes.
And I share with you. I have a friend who actually was an investment banker who took AOL public and everything. But his dad was in the room with Norbert Wiener and about 12 guys, 1948, and they coined the term cyber, which of course Greek means spearsman. But he observed that information overload permits pattern recognition, so that in cybernetics, algorithms and so forth, you can see patterns between information overload at another level. So one could argue that with the information overload and the exponential increasing capability to take the measure of things, it's easier to become pattern recognizing because of that principle. It permits pattern recognition between the various disciplines, one could say, now with the cybernetic world we're coming into.
Yeah, well, I think it's very important to take that information and try to find meaning in it.
Oh, well, find meaning by taking patterns that interrelate the various aspects of various disciplines, like we were talking psychology, economics, everything else divided down, or you get a PhD in the use of the pluperfect tense in 13th century poetry in the southeast part of France or something. You're a total expert on that, but you do not pay any attention to how that fits into the broader template.
Well, exactly.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, and with the information explosion, of course, everybody has access to the information.
I think it's
the beauty of the computer.
Isn't the internet something like something manna from heaven?
Yeah, well, it's fantastic, and it's put a lot of pressure on people, though.
Yeah.
I think college professors now have to be more on their toes. You can't have your crusty old notes, that you read from, because it's hard to keep a step ahead of the students because they have access to the same information now.
Well, also with linear regression and that, the specialization, I used to be in academia 40 years ago and we did all that and everything, and the linear regression in the computer has just galloped towards specialization. It's in every field. You don't, there's no large systems thinking is not encouraged at all. First of all, economically, you do very much better economically if you have some specialized thing. In medicine, you don't become a general practitioner or try to see the whole body. You become specialized in doing surgery on the right finger. That's where you make the money. It's in the law. It's in everything like that.
Of course, also with the information explosion, it enables people to selectively pick information to support or distort reality or to support a particular position.
So you get other views other than the established conventional wisdom.
Well, that's why I say
available.
the important thing is to bring meaning, to organize all of that information into some kind of meaningful statement about it that encompasses the broad information.
How broadly can we go in terms of that?
Well, it depends on how attentive you are to detail and how determined you are to give an accurate picture
There's two
of things. Otherwise, as I say, people select. I mean, that's why we get all of these spins on television. Lots of information, but often it's very selective information.
And it's also making possibility of emphasizing one thing over another. I had a hero, Bucky Fuller. I don't know anybody better in the history of mankind.
Yeah, well, he's one of your heroes, right?
He is definitely. McLuhan. James Joyce could read very well the implications.
I think I told you my only connection to him. I met him once when I was doing it on a book tour, doing a television show out in California, and he was the next guest, so I met him out.
Did you get his scent to have a little more than a 5-minute exchange?
Well, he was rushing in. He was next. He's got interview.
He died in 1983 and everything, but he said, among other things, he said, we got to get over the absolutely absurd notion that everyone has to earn a living. Now that's so comprehensively, appropriately.
Well, that's a very challenging statement.
It's very challenging because that's the only thing people are told to concentrate on anymore. I mean, all of the politicals say you got to get a job. It's all on getting a job. Education has just turned into a place to get people able to work into the market and that sort of thing, by and large, in real learning. But he also said we ought to be able to move to where we will get a comprehensive overview of like an operating manual for Spaceship Earth. He coined the term Spaceship Earth, and you got to get we do not have an overarching understanding of what the hell is going on in an evolutionary sense because we're so caught up on dealing with the various parts of the overall pattern of understanding was his thesis. Can we ever get to a point where we'll get to an operating manual and some rationale for there being a qualitative transformation and evolution at this particular time?
Well, that's interesting. I think that first we have to acknowledge that concept of Spaceship Earth. In a sense, it's another way of looking at what somebody like Edgar Mitchell realized when he was returning from the moon.
That's right,
of seeing this minor little object that we all
and we saw the Earth rise. It was
called Earth. You know, a little pebble floating around in the universe.
Quite literally,
and it led to a big epiphany for him. And he started ions.
He's got a noetic
Institute of
noetic science.
Right.
That's really an important place, a source for getting that kind of overview,
The
don't
study
you think?
of consciousness.
Yes.
studying the evolution of consciousness.
Are there others like that that one can repair to? Where do we go? Whole Earth Catalog? I don't know. Or comprehensive overview. Bucky Fuller had a thing called Design Science. Well, where do we go for systems thinking that gets at the larger pattern, or one that's emerging? Or is it possible to do that? Is it an impossible thing to get an overview or a systems understanding of things, much less the rationale by which we're doing that when we've never been able to do it? We couldn't do it in Tom Jefferson's
day. I think there are big thinkers that are addressing
that.
Who?
Where? Who are
in
the
the
people?
Spiritual world, there are people doing that, looking at the bigger, broader issues and our place in the universe. I think the bigger problem is that we're being swept away by a lot of thinking that is at the other end of the spectrum, that doesn't recognize spaceship Earth, doesn't recognize that we're just one small object floating around in this vast universe. So you can get the naysayers on global warming. You can get the naysayers on protecting the environment. That it leads to a lot of hubris about who we are, and forgetting that we're just a part of nature, that we're part of it too, that we don't own it and we don't rule it.
Absolutely. That's a major problem confronting us, isn't it?
And
hubris
I think
is a good term
if we don't get beyond that, you can have all the big thinkers you want, nobody's going to pay attention to them.
You could have big thinkers, but there's also a gestation kind of process in terms of evolution of social affairs or human affairs or political affairs, but that's also within a larger context that we begin to understand, say, since Darwin. When people had a self-reflective consciousness that had evolved in the human species after Homo habilis, I guess, a couple 100,000 years ago, 10,000 generations, they could ask the bigger question, what's it all about? And they created and needed to create and address that, those larger issues, and we came up with creation stories. And they vary, Thor and Krakens and things like that, and Jesus
every
and
religious
Judah,
tradition
and the religious,
has...
are the religious traditions that have given meaning, and you've written on it, I know, based upon creation stories that were based in a condition of actually, in terms of scientific understanding, that is coming exponentially now, based on creation stories that are just legends, and they're not got any basis in fact, that we're coming now to understand things more clearly in an intellectual way.
People like to see them as metaphors, as archetypes for the way we look at things, but then there are other there are others that take it literally.
Oh, they do indeed. I think those things have great meaning. Galileo was only let off the hook about 12 years ago by the Catholic Church for saying we're not the center of the universe, because it messed with people's sense of identity. And as a psychologist, a sense of identity is really important, no? And those religious systems and those spiritual systems, they are part of an overall pattern, including political and economic, that have to be subsumed, apparently, and anchoring to, have to be subsumed, coming out of history in the sense that we're coming to a qualitative transformation in evolutionary terms. That in the universe we may be, is it too strong to say, we may be transcending at the end of the birth canal 200,000 years of Homo sapien existence, and there's going to be a new punctuated equilibrium moment, and a new relationship to the universe will emerge that is synergistically unable to be known here within the womb. Something on that order.
Well, many spiritual gurus have predicted that. You hear that all the time, that we're on the verge of a new order.
That's a new age thinking. Yeah. But don't they base themselves on the Vedic or on the Judaic or something, and everything, and the political classes use those kind of things to get a political advantage? And the traditional spiritual traditions are inadequate to understand the qualification. They'd be included, but we can't go along with the traditional systems of thought that gave meaning to people, also a certain ethical sense, in the name of spiritual. It's inadequate to what the future requires. They will be subsumed along with our outdated economic notions, our outdated material reality things. They'll be subsumed as something coming out of history that are not relating to the future.
Well,
I'm just wondering. That would be comprehensive thinking. And there isn't very much of it around, it seems to me.
We don't see much evidence of it right now.
We don't, but don't you think there's something blowing in the wind, Bobby Dylan said? Or do you?
There's always something blowing in the wind.
Yeah, that's the true fact. Very good true fact, yeah.
But the problem is how many people recognize it and then flow with it.
Yeah. Okay, all of those are questions that are worthy of consideration and everything. I sort of think we're in that kind of a situation, and I don't know, there's very little of that, and it happens in a temporal context or something. You're a psychologist, and so
yes.
We know now. Isn't it magnificent what we're do you have a feeling every day over the transom comes another revolution in from another field somewhere that is earth-shattering in its implications of our understanding things more and more and being reported?
Well, there are a lot of things.
Like a quickening.
Well, that's true, because we do have all this access to information.
Yeah.
And we have so many people that are exploring new avenues, and they have access to computers that speeds up the way in which we can analyze and look
Bernad,
at things.
it's going exponential. Don't you think it's going exponential? It's not hyperbolic, or it's not historic. It's going at an exponential level. No wonder there's so much angst, because there's so much threatening of the means and the institutions, maybe outdated, that give us meaning and security and identity, are being challenged by the zeitgeist.
But on the other hand, is this helping us move in a positive direction?
Let's hope.
In terms of how we live on this planet.
Right.
How we relate to each other.
Yeah, right. No, absolutely. And there are new questions that are arising, and it's a new challenging moment, because the leading edge of that we got consciousness, don't we? And then that varies. We got all the creatures. We're ecologically, we all walk in a sea of bacteria. It's all one system. We're all part of one system. But we have a consciousness, and we have not only a consciousness, but we have the ability to extend our consciousness through tools and technology uniquely. It would seem to me.
But yet, Harold, with all of these advances that we've made, and all of the potential for moving into new dimensions, look at the way that people are actually struggling today.
Ensconced within the outdated, perhaps, ontologic considerations of the broader reality, one of which is there's not nearly enough. That there is scarcity is an ontologic thing that is accepted, and if you try to say anything like we may be transcending scarcity...
Yes, but here, Harold, we're contrasting potential with reality.
Exactly.
With what we have. Actually.
Well, that would be like ontological.
Look at the political discourse.
I know,
today.
It's absurd. No, but they're reifying outdated institutions if that positive... I'm very worried about the state of condition. I mean, because if you think of the political process, you write a lot on the politics and so on, no matter how you parse it or something, it seems to me the thing that holds still politically, geopolitical and thinking out of history and so forth, that what we have is something that would be seen not just in geopolitical terms, but geopolitique, like Haushofer. And essentially it is whoever got the advantage weapon systems and the leading source of support for all of the great thinkers who've come along by the political classes. Medici's liked Da Vinci not because he could paint a beautiful painting, because he could make a siege machine that gave their tribe advantage over the tribe in the other valley. And they could go and conquer, and they could steal, and they could do whatever. And that the gun, whoever had the military advantage, was able to oppose their system and their thought pattern on the other. It's called realpolitik. Don't be talking about ideals or love or good deals or justice or any of those things. It's who's ever got the political power to enforce and intimidate and maybe also, what's the term, co-opt Well, masses do, and it still holds, and that's still what's leading the way in which the world operates. It's outdated, perhaps, with the idea of some transformation that calls for something new, and there's no signs of anything new being done.
Well, yes, just look at the headlines, look at the conflicts around the world, look at the genocides that are going on as we speak.
Drones. They got these drones now. It's like some dystopic thing where they can go with a drone and hit anybody on the head or kill them or wipe out a valley or a village or anything like that with the power. And they've got the power, so they can do whatever. They're above the law. If you're powerful enough, you're above the law, of any kind of law or any sense of justice, it seems. And that's very worrying when the weapons become, through advancement of time and technology, to where they get to the point, along about 1970, where they became species lethal of the Homo sapiens species.
So then how...
Do you think that's true? Robert J. Lifton writes on it.
It begs another question.
Yes, sir.
Of how do we get from this level to that other level that you were talking about before?
Well, I think it's worthwhile just sticking to that. Robert J. Lifton writes very well on it. I did a program, he said, I welcome the question. And there is modeling that shows that. Do you think that after the in the Second World War, we were impotent at the level of species, right? We always have been. We could wipe out the other tribe, or we could be strong and win.
Well, we have enough nuclear weapons today to wipe out the world 10 times over.
Oh, wait a minute. That's a very strong statement if you're talking seriously, or you're just throwing out a soundbite. We destroy the world. We can't destroy the world. I don't think there's any modeling that shows we can force the world to fall apart.
No, I'm saying that we have enough nuclear weapons in our arsenal, and a number of other countries as well, to wipe out the whole planet. No.
Well, where do you, could you send me modeling on that? I don't think so. I don't think, we have the weapon, we have the ability since about 1970 only. 1962, you're old enough to remember that. We came within a hair's breadth of wiping out civilization. We can wipe out civilization. No doubt of that.
We got that about the confrontation.
The connection, the collective destructive capability of our extended consciousness is reached an existential different level in terms of that. But from about the year 1970, even in '62, if they had unleashed that, there would have been some survivors. But you reach a point where you can wipe out the Homo sapiens species. That's like end conscious evolution in universe. That's something new out of history. It signals a new moment existentially in the evolution of consciousness, right? And then one could just say, is there something on the adverse side of that? But that point, do you think it's understood? Is it in the consciousness of the world's citizenry, maybe subliminally? But everything's okay now because, let's say, capitalism defeated socialism, so the conflict, the good guys have won. Us, so everything's okay, and we got start and we bring it down, but they got new weapons. But is the issue still one that is subconsciously informing the consciousness of the Homo sapiens species or not? That we're looking for something new, or indications of something new, like the end of a gestation period.
Well,
can you understand?
We may claim to be looking for something new, but in reality, as you look at the world scene, and the politics that we were talking about.
It's still based on realpolitik.
I mean, there doesn't seem to be any evidence that we're moving toward this higher consciousness.
Thank you. That's what I guess I'm getting at. And there's no operating manual that says this. There's nothing is feeling for a comprehensive context beyond the historically inherited institutions we've inherited and reify every day. All of our
Well, in many respects, we're still living at the Neanderthal level. And
but those
a lot of the political debates center around that, of each man, woman protecting his or her cave.
That's right. Yeah, it's based in that primitive level.
It really is that kind of
and
thinking.
We ought to be careful.
Many people in the political debate seem to want to, they attack, they criticize, and they seem to want to eliminate what many of us recognize as the basic foundation or principle of civilization, the social contract.
Right, okay.
I mean, the very simple principle of people caring for each other, being responsible for each other, not just for yourself that we are a community,
right,
as a nation,
and
as a world community. Where is the evidence, though, despite that all of the religious traditions predict that? I think I told you before, that's why I do this annual article called We Are a Religious Nation, or Are We? And the list gets longer and longer, the contradictions, the hypocrisies of what we profess we believe in, and compared to our report card of our actual behaviors.
And it's hard. Galileo got off the hook only 12 years ago, so it takes time for people's identities are wrapped up in institutional structures and in thought patterns. And if they're messing with their identity...
What was actually the issue, the threatening issue behind what Galileo was saying?
Well, it was
that the Earth is not the center of the universe.
Yeah, but that was a big thing in terms of religious...
because it was challenging the whole notion that we are the center of the universe.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And for the same reason that evolution has been challenged, the idea that we're just part of a process, that we're basically animals, that we've come from primitive forms that have evolved into this higher form, when we prefer to see ourselves, no, we're special. We were created especially, we're above that. Freud's notion of, the id, that we're all primitive, that at our core, we're primitive impulses.
Well, the limbic cord
reacted to that too, because that too was the same threat, that wait a second, we're special, we're different, we're not part of the collective universe.
Well, we know in terms
we're
of
above it.
Yeah, well, there's something to be, because we have the reptilian core, and it's just built up until we finally get the cortex, and there is an evolutionary process up the evolutionary pattern, and so we get to a point where we're able to be self-reflective.
Right, but what I'm saying here is that I think that we're still fighting the same principle that put Galileo under house arrest.
I think you're right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I know. I think you're right. And in that sense, and those institutions are still there, that people will go, and then what do they call them, creation or something? Or they'll deny the fact that we're embedded in nature, and evolution is the means by which we got here and understand. But we're coming to understand it more intellectually. I don't know if it began with the Enlightenment or what it did, but we're beginning to understand things intellectually more and more, and the old systems that we needed. We needed to have some sort of an explanation psychologically with that. I don't think a crocodile gives much thought to the major issues of the universe. I would assume, or many of the creatures do.
Well, if they do, they haven't informed us yet.
No, and they haven't informed the antelope that they're about to eat. It all goes, Woody Allen said, the lion and the lamb will lie down together and the lamb will get very little sleep. But then the question is, are we at a time, do you think it's possible for us to conceive, or is there anybody anywhere other than the traditional religious kind of things that have been put, Rig Veda and the Vedic and that kind of thing, consciousness will come, materialism will come out of consciousness, pre-existing, and consciousness will go into new, materialism will go into the right wing and all that. I mean, the Western model, the traditional model of the spiritual traditions that aren't paid much attention to by the political classes and so forth. Are we at a point of qualitative transformation existentially? We get to the point where we can destroy the Homo sapiens. We can't destroy the world. We can't destroy life. We can destroy the Homo sapiens species, apparently. There should be, if that's the case, citizens should be made aware of that fact rather than it never coming up.
Well, what you're saying is that something will survive, even if
there will be, life will survive. Give it a couple billion years.
The cockroach, but
the cockroach.
It's been around for billions of years.
Yeah,
apparently before we were here.
That's right. But in terms of our thinking, in terms of the evolution of consciousness, the self-reflective, the whole thing that led to us at this time now having an ability to take the measure of things, to build, to make the environment other than an Eden-like sense is given and nested in nature, the whole thing, the evolution of conscious understanding, knowledge. We can bring that to a screeching halt. Not just do it because one political class, or you get rid of Marx, then you got Schumpeter or some sort of thing like that, but that we can stop the whole process itself seems to have come to a point only since about the year 1970. And that this is a qualitative transformation that we were blessed or cursed to be born into. That we have this kind. Is that something? It never seems to be brought up. Everything's
the
okay.
qualitative transformation?
Yeah, qualitative, at species level, not just
in other words,
another
we're
political
moving to another level.
Another level in universe. Yeah, it's like we were
Well, some
habilis.
people believe that. There's this very popular book out now by Steven Pinker.
Pinker, yeah.
In which he says that we're getting less warlike, less violent as a species, and apparently he has all the data to show that. Now that seems counterintuitive from what we read in the headlines.
Well, I wonder.
Every day.
No, but
but
on
on the other hand, he's suggesting what you're saying, that there has been a qualitative change. But on the other hand, you could counter that argument with what we've made mention of, the potential for us to destroy the entire planet. So what would it mean that we've ratcheted up a number of notches in terms of consciousness, but if we actually fell into a situation where we wiped out most of the life on this...
conscious evolutionary advance as we understand it in universe.
So where is the progress in that?
Well, that would be the end of all that progress. That's what I'm saying. We couldn't do it. We were trying in the Second World War. We were trying to kill each other with hate. Firebombing Dresden, women and children, hate, let loose. We were impotent.
Right.
Okay, in this process of extending consciousness.
But on the other hand, maybe there's another point of view here, because we...
Well, let's hope so.
Well, we've had... this discussion has happened... I
suppose.
Since Isaiah. Saying
but there was no way that it could
be... spiritual people and religious people and philosophers throughout the ages predicting and saying that we're on the verge of some huge kind of transformation, some elevation of consciousness. And yet, as we look back at the broad expanse of history and the atrocities that humans have committed and the brutality to each other, you wonder about that. And it seems to me there's a simple answer to that. We're always trying to figure out figure out how we can ratchet up to these other levels of conscious transformation. But maybe there's a simpler explanation.
What's that
evolution has failed us.
Well,
that we're a few genes short, of being truly civilized. I forget the exact figure, but it's quoted very often that the difference between us and chimpanzees in terms of genetics is, I think it's like 2%.
No, not that much. Not that much.
I thought the figure was 2 or 3%. Well, whatever, it's a minor percentage difference.
Yeah, right.
Well, what if it were 4% or 5% or 6%?
Yeah.
So I think that
it's been a
more
fail.
To the point that
the
evolution has failed
whole business
us,
been
we're
a
not
failed,
ready for civilization.
Well, the whole business has been a failed proposition for 3.5 billion years. The whole evolutionary process has been a failure in terms of getting some sort of relationship at a conscious level with a higher order in the universe. Like
but
Harold,
on the other hand, though, there are individuals. Call them sages or whatever, who seem to have an evolved consciousness.
I think so. This Pinker fellow is good. What's the book? Do you happen to know the name? You've done your duty. Okay. I know. I've been in touch. I got to get in touch. Believe me, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for, and I can't find it.
I've read the reviews. I've been intrigued by it, and I have it on order.
Let's both look that up and help one another in terms of understanding a possible light at the end of the tunnel. That's what we're looking for.
I think that what's more important is that
because they're heading for Armageddon.
We have to see evidence of the light.
Yeah. Well, the people bring it up.
Because we see more of Armageddon than the light.
Well, we're able to model it easier, aren't we? Because the leading thing of the Homo sapien infrastructure building and so forth is war. Because that's how you get to be above the law. If you notice, a winner never goes in the dock of international law for war crimes. You notice? If you win, you're above the law. So you better be a winner. If you're a winner, you can do whatever you want.
Well, and also there's that famous quote that the winners get to write history.
They do, don't they? Is that? I'm not sure who that is. That's Gibbon, but and James Joyce had that. Let's say history is a nightmare. One could add of injustice from which we're attempting to awaken. So those are siege, and he was reading the in James Joyce. James Joyce was reading the implications of the technology, and we're not changed biologically. I don't think. What's changed is the technological extension of our consciousness, and the leading thing that's given power politically is weapons, so that you can conquer and require the other person to do what you jolly well think they should. Realpolitik, it's called. Don't be idealistic, be real. And so there's that. So I don't know. Pinker is a good thing. Others, because there's modeling on the other side. What about it? Can you set it up in a yin-yang kind of way, Buddhist or something, where you got this destructive capability, this new existential? And what would be the counterpart in a materialistically oriented world, not a spiritual one? Put that aside for a while about God or something. But in a materialistic sense, just reading it intellectually, which would be equally existentially significant to the fact that we can wipe out the Homo sapiens species. What would be an equally significant qualitative transformation in material evolution that would be on the what would be called the living side or the positive side in terms of what's going on existentially? One suggestion is we may have, through design and through doing more with less, the microchip's an example.
Well, but maybe that's...
We may have transcended material scarcity as an ontologic reality. All of human affairs have evolved within a condition where it's assumed scarce. We may have made a major transformation, and some of those modelings go back to about the same year, around 1970. There was something blowing in the wind, Bobby Dylan said. But what do you think of the possibility that we may be able to come to realize there is enough for all, including the ecology?
Well, what I think I hear you saying, Harold, or asking the question, is it possible to solve all of the dilemmas and the human issues that we're facing at the practical, functional level that we're at, without having to go to some evolved higher consciousness?
Well, no. I think what we're talking, we began talking about capability as opposed to the reality, right? We have a capability to wipe out humanity. We haven't done it, but we have the capability. 100 years or 50 years ago, we didn't have the capability. We now have the capability. So on the positive side, we have, and all of our institutions are reified.
Well, that's why I brought up the idea that even if it were true that we are less warlike, we're less violent compared to tens of thousands of years ago. What ultimately does that mean if we can talk about being on the verge of wiping out civilization because we have the means to do that now? Look at the debate that we're having about Iran. And nuclear weapons.
Exactly. I'm very worried. I'm very
whether
worried.
We're going to go to war, whether we're going to attack, what the response might be, what the implications may be for the future of the planet and the future of life.
Exactly. You're worried about what sort of, and don't think rational. Don't try to put it right. It wouldn't have anything, it would have to be something that destructive, would have to be something that would lead to, in a spasm, Guns of August, Barbara Tuchman, some sort of thing of irrational unleashing of the weapons of the United States of America.
Right, and also there's apocalyptic philosophies. There are groups that believe that the apocalypse must come, and somehow
then there'll be a rapture.
Out of this there'll be either a rapture or what will rise, with the phoenix rising out of the ashes will be whatever your preferred group is.
Right, exactly. 144,
there are people that believe that. And those
Christians, evangelical Christians are bought into
it's
that.
It's infused in a lot of different traditions, and some of them date way back, and you wonder, well, how come we're still thinking about those things, and in the same breath talking about, the elevation of consciousness and the new order, and that there's going to be some great transformation, or that it's imminent, that transformation?
If I may, I hear what you're saying exactly, but that's based on reifying outdated notions of good and evil and so forth that we've inherited out of history of ignorance. I mean, those things that say, our tribe is the best. We're good, they're bad. Gott mit uns. It's all over the place. Everybody thinks they're the chosen people. They can have the right to rule over others and all that kind of stuff. But what we're talking about is an alteration at a material level, just a material level, without all the propagandistic stuff and everything, the ability to have something realized. I mean, the special theory of relativity came along, general theory came, Edward Teller came upon the scene, and this whole thing built up, and now they got germs, they got predators, they got some dystopic predator thing they're going to do with geopolitical extension of power to beat everybody into seeing things their way. Mm-hmm. But it's a capability. And what would be the capability? What would be the capability in terms of that of the universe that is extended consciousness on the positive side, that could be posited and perhaps modeled? Bucky Fuller tried to model in World Game.
Again,
how about the premise?
We can identify.
Wait, now, let me just make the point. Is it possible we have, through elegance of design, that we have transcended material scarcity as an ontologic reality? That we can take care of everybody. There's no reason for anybody to be hungry. We have a capability through good design of doing without raping the planet. We can be in touch with the environment, but all of our institutions were predicated in an ontologic understanding, and we're reifying that has been transcended at that level of capability. So both are at a level of capability. We have no oversight or no understanding of the overall thing that lets us get to a thing that the future requires. We're reifying outdated institutions, is what I'm trying to get at.
But at the same time,
how about material scarcity and transcending material scarcity? Is that possible, or ipso facto absurd?
Well, it very well may be possible, but
that's a big thing to consider.
But at the same time,
yes, sir.
You're talking about hypothetical reality, what is possible.
Yeah, like blowing up the species is possible.
Well, it may be possible that we could feed everybody.
Okay, wait a minute. Not feed. More than not feed. More than feed. It's knowledge. It's understanding. It's good design. It's an operating manual for a situation where there is enough, rather than where the assumption is for some to win, others have to lose. Scarcity. Transcending scarcity in the largest sense of the word, which might bring us into a Gaia kind of resonating of all the people that make up the universe, of the population, and the ecology, and we'll come to a resonating relationship to universe transcended to what we've been throughout 2,000 years. We're coming to a moment of liberation in the universe.
What you are picturing here, what you are drawing for us, is a hypothetical reality that surely is possible. Okay.
Why is it never spoken of? In the popular press or in anything, it's all just politics.
Well, I think there are some people.
Where? You got Mr. Pinker, that's somebody worth looking at.
Well, there are people like the Dalai Lama, and there are other more evolved people, some of them spiritual people, spiritual leaders, who you talk about idealism and what we're capable of and what the potential is for us sharing resources for everybody to live better. But let's look at the reality. Okay, so here is this reality, the hypothetical reality, and then we look at what's going on, and what's one of our major debates now? The 1% versus the 99%.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, we can't get beyond that. I mean,
that's what I'm worried about, brother. Aren't you?
Well, I am.
We don't have vision. We don't have vision on a large.
The gap between the reality of 1% versus 99%,
it's absurd.
And then talking about 10,000 children a day worldwide dying of starvation.
It's disgusting.
And we could go on and on with the dreary figures here in our own country.
Yeah.
Okay. As a matter of fact, I wrote an article recently. What was the title of it? Corporations Plan for Post-Middle-Class America.
Okay, well,
that we're moving toward adjusting to the fact that the middle class is gone. And the evidence for that, this wasn't just a spin on a story. It was a report about the plans, the production, the product development and marketing strategies of some of our major corporations, which are now directed toward what is called the hourglass economy.
Okay.
You know, the hourglass which has two chambers and virtually nothing in the middle. And that's a metaphor for rich and poor. And what a number of companies, I named one in there that was quoted in the Wall Street Journal article, Procter & Gamble, which is developing products for the bottom market. Okay, because the middle class is gone. And there are other companies like Saks that are developing more developing more products for the
elite,
the upper crust.
I don't even think it's 1%. I think the real growth went to about 1/100th of 1%.
Well, in terms of marketing, they're talking more about
the luxury market,
marketing and developing products for the upper 20%. And then for the rest of the population, which is they're forecasting by their product development and their business plans. Remember, business plans are projected into the future.
That's right.
So they're developing the idea that, hey, we see what's going. The middle class is gone, and they're saying we don't see that coming back. So we better develop products for the bottom, you know, and the top. And then there was a report that about Citibank that they were very early to recognize this, the hourglass economy in 2009, and they developed
after the crash.
Their investment advisory group. Came up with a portfolio, an hourglass portfolio. In other words, investment in companies that address the bottom and that address the top. And its year-to-year profit was like 56%.
Not bad gain.
Confirming that there's a reality to that we are what's called a bimodal society now. That a lot of people have been talking about, and you know, and others denying it. You know, rich and poor. And we seem to be going that way. Another indication of that.
Spell it out. This is really good.
There was an interesting article in, I think it was in an American Prospect recently, talking about education, and that's something I've written a lot about, the student loans and the dropout rate because of the incredible cost of education. But this article made reference to the fact that it said, you know, a lot of people in this country, and particularly the conservative right, have kind of lost interest in education. They may talk about it, you know, No Child Left Behind. They used to talk a lot about it. But there's less and less interest in it now because they realize suddenly, with the globalization of the economy and with the shifting of jobs and seeking employees and talents overseas, that we don't need that many educated people any longer.
I think it's probably true. Keynes said there's going to be massive technologically induced unemployment.
Because we
don't need people like Henry Ford needed.
The employees we need, educated employees, at lower salaries overseas. So why invest in education here, in educating people, when we're not going to employ them anyway? I mean, I'll tell you a funny story.
Tell me something funny.
An Indian friend of mine, acquaintance that I met last summer, and he came over from India. I'd say about 13 years ago. And he went to work as a programmer for one of the major tech companies here. He from India, you know, he came over here because we were the center of technology, and the jobs were here. He was recently laid off, and his job was outsourced to India.
Isn't that irony?
Now that really tells you something about the nature of the economy and the way in which corporate America is moving and thinking that we are really, at this point, it seems to me, adjusting to and accepting the fact that the middle class, for the most part, or a lot of it, is gone, and that we will be the hourglass bimodal society of rich and poor. I mean, the Occupy Wall Street people have been addressing that in terms of the 1% and 99%.
God bless
but there too, and one of the great problems I think that we're facing is what I would call the myth of the 99%. I mean, yes, it's true, because we know, and the figures have been tossed around, that the upper 1% controls major part, 40% of the, or whatever, of the wealth of this country. The upper 20% controls even, more than that of the wealth.
The tax break, Mr. Bush, went to 100th of 1%.
But at any rate, we have this imagery that we've been given, this very dramatic imagery of the 1% versus the 99%.
Right. It's worldwide.
Well, okay, and conceptually that might be true if we look at income, and we look at wealth, and we look at bank accounts, and what kind of assets and resources people have. But in functional terms, in practical terms, it's not 99% versus 1%, because that 99% is not organized. It's not a cohesive group. Right. As a matter of fact, many of them have been brainwashed. I mean, look.
Totally. That's what the educational system is all about.
The conservative right have convinced a large part of this population that health care isn't good for them.
Right. No.
Or that it should be privatized. We should give it to the insurance companies.
Brave New World.
And
1984.
An incredible figure that was revealed recently. It was in an op-ed piece in the Times, but I've seen it quoted elsewhere, that 46% of people who were receiving some forms of benefits from the government, some form of aid or assistance,
including Social Security.
Yeah, it extends into many areas that people are not even familiar with. That 46% of people who were receiving government aid say they're not receiving anything from the government.
Why? Because they just don't see that they got something done, but they didn't realize it was coming from something. That was
exactly. Just
program.
As the famous quote about the debate with Medicare, where some older people said, and I don't want the government, interfering with my Medicare.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't even aware that Medicare is a government program.
Who's that guy, Norquist? Norquist? What's his first name again? The guy who makes all the Republicans sign, never will raise any tax, and this Republican Congress has done nothing. Right. I mean, it's sort of absurd.
But I think the Wall Street, the Occupy Wall Street.
What's his name? Grover Norquist. Anyway, never mind.
But anyway, I think that the Occupy Wall Street people, and I've written about it, and I was down there. I spent a lot of time interviewing people down there. That I think a major task, I mean, rather than this mantra of 1%, 99%, or whatever, is that we have to raise the consciousness of the population to realize that they're that 99%.
Because they don't want to believe
an endangered species.
Right. And their roles and their identity. And their identities are being threatened. And that's when people get active, when their identities are being threatened.
Well, exactly. And here's a good example. The police, who often are called in to clear out these places.
33,000 soldiers, Mr. Bloomberg said. He's got a 33,000 army to occupy the occupiers.
Right.
Very dangerous. And this 324, this thing they passed in there, where they're going to be able to have anybody within any range of the political establishment with no signs or anything can be arrested. They're laying a predicate for an out-and-out police state. It's very it's very easy to read it that way.
Well, that's another dimension of what's going on. But the thing that I wanted to emphasize is that many groups in this country, part of that 99%, are not aware of how endangered they are. Police are being laid off all over the country. All municipal employees are
because they're government, right?
Well, because of the economy, because of the cutbacks. In fact, I wrote a piece called Lights Out for Third World America. And the lights out was very literal. I mean, to my shock in researching this article, I found that there are communities all over the United States that are literally shutting the street lights off at night because they can't pay their electric bills.
Unless you go and bribe somebody.
And they're going broke. The municipalities are going broke. And as they say, that has a lot of implications for lots of people who are going to be losing their jobs, including teachers. Okay. Now, one of the worst signs I saw of the bad direction that the devastating direction that we're moving in, and a lot of people previously would have thought that this is unthinkable, that there are communities, school districts all over the country now that are cutting the school week down to 4 days, okay, and other communities that are cutting the length of the school day itself. The school week being cut back to 4 days, and some reducing the school day. When the educators and other people are saying, well, for us to compete in this world today, because we're falling behind educationally by measures of where the standing of our students are in science and mathematics, that we have to compete with Japan and China and other countries. We have to extend the school day. But if you look closely, I mean, to the horror of a lot of people, and something that previously would have been thought unthinkable, we're cutting the school week. Now, how is that going to play out? Where is America heading with that, while on the other hand we're talking about educational reform and no child left behind and whatnot? I'm saying, hey, let's just protect the school day.
Not much less child care and a whole lot of other things that are needed.
You know, before we start talking about fancier things.
We only got a couple minutes left, and it all has to do with the way in which, in economic terms, you're going to form capital. And also, Lord Keynes said you're going to be confronted with massive technological unemployment at the maturity of his grandchildren in 1930, and the technology is increasingly responsible for the production of massive capability, and the productive capability of the assets, or the assets that are representing that productive capability, don't need people, and they can produce an overwhelming capability. But nobody, and the only way they tell a person of the normals of the lower level of society that they can gain income is to have what they call a job on the estate where all the assets are owned by a tiny class. And the left is blinkered toward the idea that some ownership, the way capital is formed, some ownership should be vastly distributed to people as a means for them having a claim on income. By the way things are being produced and the trend therein of technologically oriented, a combine or something.
But also, Harold,
so
much of our population doesn't know or see where we're heading. And that brings me to a definition, maybe you're familiar with this, that I saw the other day that's kind of humorous, because we don't respond to things in this country until the crisis is past. You know, that we're deep in the swamp.
And we don't do the good design.
So this is what is the and it refers to our knee-jerk responses, that we don't have immediate responses to things unless it's beyond the crisis level. So this definition of knee-jerk is that is a jerk who doesn't respond until he's on his knees.
Okay, well, listen, we only just started talking about all this. It's really a pleasure. It's been your pleasure at the Perceptions Inn. Bernard Starr, and we've been talking about things and the need for a massive change, and we ought to support and try to breathe some life into the Occupy movement to the degree we are able to, and maybe enlighten them. But I still think forming capital in a way where distribution of income to people by capital rather than labor is something that we could begin to start doing. Lewis Kelso and some people started having a system like that so that there would be income coming to people apart from their having to earn a living or having a job is a major question that we're going to have to do in terms of structuring the world in the time ahead. But that's another issue for another program.
Issue of how people can contribute.
Yes. Thank you, Bernard.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed this immensely.
Yeah, I enjoyed it immensely. Your pleasure to have his perceptions, and we invite you to tune in. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. We got to do more talking like this if we can and try to get something, because we've been born, blessed and cursed to be born, as the Chinese warned against, in the most interesting time ever in the evolution of
consciousness. And to find a way for this consciousness to rise.
To go to the right direction, right. Thanks for viewing. We're coming back again tomorrow. Thanks again. Thanks again for coming in,
Thank
Bernad.
you.
Okay. So, Bernad, Starr Ph.D. So good to talk. We just got started. Are you familiar with Kelso, or the ESOP, or the blending of ownership, capital ownership, forming capital in a way where the ownership is